Hello and welcome to another in the 10-minute tip series of recorded programs for credit and collection professionals. This one is entitled Defeating Deductions. My name is Michael Dennis. I'll be the presenter. Let's jump in. Introduction. It's not your imagination. Deduction management is never going to be easy. Disputes are never going to go away, and resolving them has been, is, and probably will continue to be both time-consuming and labor-intensive. Unfortunately, there is no single or simple way to accelerate resolution and repayment of customer deductions, and believe me, I've looked. But here's the simple reality. If we choose to do nothing, then nothing is going to change. And the problem from my perspective is whatever technique, whatever broom you're currently using to sweep up the mess involving customer deductions after the deductions have been taken, that broom is probably not big enough to continue to clean up the mess that's been created by deductions. Introduction continued. Today, I'm going to provide you with a number of ideas that you can use individually or in combination. These ideas will increase your chances of collecting deductions quickly and more easily, and I would add, more effectively. As a result of the time savings and the efficiencies, you will have more time to spend collecting past due balances and perform other time-critical tasks. From my perspective, when it comes to deduction management, the trick is to work smarter and not harder. In this program, the practical tips we'll talk about will in fact help you to work more quickly and efficiently, not harder, but in fact smarter. Before we jump into the discussion about what I'm proposing you do differently, I think it's important to think about this. From your customer's perspective, every deduction that they've taken in error is in effect an interest-free loan for them. And as you might imagine, no one is going to be in a hurry to repay an interest-free loan. Perhaps for this reason, you should be aware that customers carefully limit who in the organization has the authority to repay deductions that they have taken in error. And if limited authority was not bad enough, what I find is that customers often place a relatively low priority on addressing deductions that you can demonstrate to them and prove to them that they have taken in error. And to make matters worse, your customers' accounts payable departments often have insufficient time and insufficient resources to research deductions that they've taken in response to a claim that they've taken those deductions in error. And to make things worse still, your customers' accounts payable departments often do not have the authority to repay deductions even after you've sent proof or documentation proving the deduction taken was taken in error. On the following slides, I've identified about 20 different ways to more rapidly resolve deductions. For example, it's important to carefully document your deduction research so you don't have to repeat that work at any point. Before trying to collect, it's key to ensure that the customer has the relevant supporting documentation. So before starting your collection efforts, send the relevant documentation explaining the customer's error to them in writing. If you're a supervisor or a manager, regularly evaluate the volume of deductions being handled by each person to ensure that the workload they have is manageable. Track both the number and the various types of deductions being taken by your customers for trends that might indicate internal problems within your company. Perhaps an illustration would be helpful. Let's assume that you're aware that the average number of pricing-related deductions taken in any given month averages about 50. And you take a look at the number of pricing deductions taken in the prior month, and it turns out to be 121. What might we conclude from the fact that there is this abnormal number of pricing deductions in the previous month? Well, we might conclude that there's nothing to see here, there's nothing statistically relevant about it, and we can go on our way. Or we might become concerned that potentially there's a problem in our pricing system or with our order entry team, or perhaps involving a new salesperson that has created some sort of ambiguity or problem that is resulting in this jump in the number of pricing deductions in the previous month. So in this scenario, rather than hoping for the best and or ignoring the statistical abnormality, what I'm encouraging you to do is take action as quickly as possible to try to identify an issue before it becomes a problem for the credit department and for your company. Final thought on this slide: measure and report on internal delays in issuing credit memos that your company owes to customers. Ways to rapidly resolve deductions continue. Track the status, the next action required, and the follow-up date in connection with every deduction that you are managing. Among the items that should be included in your notes would be who you spoke to, their title, what specifically was discussed, what agreement, if any, was reached during that discussion, which party has the next action step. Is it you? Is it them? Is it someone else in your organization? Is it someone else in their organization? A description of what the action item is and its schedule. What's the time frame? When is this going to happen? And in addition, your notes would indicate what other steps, what additional steps are needed to get the deduction repaid or alternatively credited off if in fact a credit is owed to the customer. Ways to rapidly resolve deductions continued. The longer we delay in researching and addressing a customer deduction, the more difficult it is to collect that deduction. The more likely it is that we're either going to have to write it off or credit it off. In your first discussion with the customer about the status of a deduction that they have taken, ask who it is, who in their organization has to approve repayment. We need to have that information on file for future reference. When you find that a customer has in fact taken a deduction and that deduction was taken in error, it's important to set your expectations. Your expectation should be that once you have provided the relevant supporting documentation demonstrating and proving that the deduction was taken in error, that the customer will repay that deduction on their next check. Once you have done the research and then provided the necessary supporting documentation in writing to the customer, don't begin your discussion with that customer by asking if that customer received the supporting documentation in connection with the deduction you expect them to repay. Now you might be asking, why not? And there's a very simple answer. The simple answer is that if they say, no, I'm sorry, I don't think we received that, then they have in effect just derailed your discussion, your efforts to collect that balance. Now you have to go ahead and you have to provide the supporting documentation again, and that's simply another delay. Where if you'd simply made the assumption that they received it and go on to talk about it, there is not that possibility that they can simply say, yep, we didn't get it, and push the problem down the road. This one is a bit controversial, but please at least consider the idea of writing off relatively small dollar nuisance deductions so that you have more time to spend focusing on large dollar deductions, unpaid invoices, and other priority items. If the research required from other departments is taking too long, offer to help that other department in order to accelerate the process so that you can make a determination whether or not you owe them a credit or they owe you repayment of the deduction in error. When you send something out to another department to have them respond or provide relevant documentation, make sure that you are tracking those responses to be sure that you're receiving timely responses to your inquiries. Clearly, if whatever you're doing, whatever your tools you're using to address and resolve deductions is only marginally effective at managing deductions, then it's time to try something new. As a general rule, I encourage you to tighten internal processes and procedures to reduce the number of deductions taken. To give visibility into how significant the deduction problem is in connection with the total accounts receivable, publish the number of deductions taken, the dollar value, and the types of deduction-related errors being made internally every month in a report to senior management. And I'm sometimes asked this, how do I know that an internal error has been made? And the simple answer is because we owed the customer a credit memo. And the final tip for more rapidly resolving customer deductions is this: consider creating a deduction management specialist position rather than requiring collectors to manage collections of invoices as well as deductions. As always, thank you for attending one of these 10-minute tips programs. If you would like to hear the entire on-demand program on this topic, please contact my sponsor, Wisconsin Credit Association, for information about this and other recorded on-demand programs. And have a great day. Thanks, everybody.